Dr. Arvind Solkar was the man everyone trusted, a respected gynecologist whose clinic symbolized safety and care. Mira Solkar, his devoted wife, believed she was married to a healer. But behind those polished doors of Solkar Women's Care, young women were vanishing, secrets were buried, and a horrifying truth waited to surface. When Mira uncovered what her husband's clinic was truly being used for, the perfect marriage turned into a nightmare, one that would end in cold-blooded murder. Dr. Arvind Solkar was the kind of man everyone in Pune admired. His reputation as a brilliant gynecologist was known across the city. Patients often waited for hours just to consult with him, and yet he never seemed impatient or tired. To the public, he was the image of compassion and professionalism. His clinic, Solkar Women's Care, stood proudly in the heart of a quiet neighborhood, its glass doors polished and its walls filled with framed certificates and smiling photographs of newborn babies. People saw a doctor who brought life into the world, not someone capable of taking it away. At home, his wife Mira Solkar lived a comfortable life. She was a schoolteacher, humble and soft-spoken, the kind of woman who believed goodness always triumphed. Their marriage, though quiet, seemed stable. Mira admired her husband's dedication to his work, and she often stayed up late to help him organize patient files or manage clinic finances. The neighbors saw them as a perfect couple, two educated, well-respected people who had built their success through hard work. But beneath the surface of that perfect life, small cracks had already begun to appear. Mira had started noticing things that didn't fit the image her husband projected. There were late-night calls that ended abruptly when she entered the room, and unexplained absences on weekends. He sometimes returned home with the faint smell of disinfectant mixed with something metallic, something that made her uneasy. Whenever she asked, Arvind smiled and said he had an emergency surgery or a difficult case. She believed him. After all, why wouldn't she? Across town, a series of missing person cases had started to quietly unfold. Young women from nearby villages were vanishing without a trace. They were all from struggling families, most looking for jobs or medical help in the city. Police investigations led nowhere. There were no witnesses, no suspects, only a growing fear among locals. Newspapers carried small columns about the disappearances, but the stories faded quickly, buried under daily headlines. Kiran Joshi, a newly appointed social worker with a small NGO, was the only one who noticed a strange pattern. While reviewing case files of the missing girls, she found that several of them had visited the same area before disappearing. It was the same part of town where Solkar Women's Care stood. The connection seemed thin, but it nagged at her. She began quietly asking around, visiting clinics, and collecting information. Meanwhile, Dr. Arvind continued to expand his practice. He hired new staff, renovated the clinic, and even opened a separate section for private patients. He claimed it was for women who needed confidentiality, but the section was always locked and accessible only to him and a select few. The staff never questioned him. They were afraid to lose their jobs, and besides, the doctor's charm and authority made it easy to trust whatever he said. Mira remained oblivious to what her husband was truly involved in. Her days passed in the rhythm of teaching, cooking, and maintaining the home. She occasionally visited the clinic to help with paperwork, unaware that beyond the public areas, darker rooms existed, places where her husband's kindness turned into cruelty. The city around them carried on as usual. Festivals came and went, and the clinic's waiting area remained crowded. Arvind's name appeared in local magazines, celebrating his service to women's health. He gave interviews about family planning and women's rights, his voice calm, his smile sincere. Yet at night, behind those same glass doors, something unspeakable took place. Something that would soon begin to unravel his carefully constructed life. The first real hint came when one of the doctor's staff members abruptly resigned and left the city. No one knew why. A few days later, a patient's family complained about a missing relative who had last been seen entering Solkar Women's Care for a routine consultation. The police didn't investigate further. The clinic's reputation shielded it from suspicion. But for Mira, the seed of doubt had finally been planted. Everything still appeared perfect from the outside. The shining clinic, the smiling doctor, the quiet, loyal wife. Yet beneath that polished image, the story of deceit, greed, and human suffering was waiting to surface. It would only take one more disappearance to shatter the illusion forever. When Ria Vankur first walked through the glass doors of Solkar Women's Care, she felt lucky. It was her first job as a nurse after finishing her training. and being hired by a respected doctor like Arvind Solkar felt like a dream. The clinic looked clean, professional, and welcoming. Patients greeted Dr. Solkar with gratitude, and the staff spoke of him with admiration. For Ria, it seemed like the perfect place to begin her career. During the first few weeks, everything appeared normal. Her duties were simple: assisting in checkups, preparing reports, and managing medicine supplies. But soon she began to notice little things that didn't fit the image of a normal medical clinic. There were patients who arrived after regular hours, escorted by strangers who didn't look like family members. The doctor would ask Ria to leave early on such nights, claiming he had private consultations. When she arrived the next morning, the clinic would be spotless. But there was always a faint smell of bleach in the air and missing entries from the appointment register. Ria tried to ignore her unease, but curiosity kept growing. She started staying late, pretending to finish paperwork, hoping to see what really went on after hours. One evening, when the clinic was closing, she heard muffled voices coming from the basement. It was an area she had never been allowed to enter. The door was always locked, and Dr. Solkar kept the only key. She stepped closer, pressing her ear against the wall. There was movement, maybe someone crying, followed by the sound of a door shutting. Her heartbeat quickened. She stepped back quietly and left, pretending nothing had happened. Over the next few days, Ria noticed more disturbing details. There were medical files with no patient addresses, some with only first names. Large cash payments were recorded without receipts. She once found a broken bracelet in the waste bin near the storage room. A cheap trinket, but not something any of the regular patients would wear. The next morning it was gone. Her fear grew stronger when one of her co-workers, a lab technician, told her he was leaving the job without explanation. He looked pale, his eyes tired. "It's not safe here," he whispered once before walking out of the clinic forever. That was the moment Ria realized something was very wrong. One night, while cleaning the storage area, she noticed that one of the medicine cabinets was slightly ajar. Behind the stacked boxes of medical supplies, a small metal latch was visible. Curiosity overtook her fear. She pushed the cabinet aside, revealing a narrow door that blended into the wall. Her hands trembled as she turned the latch and stepped inside. The room was dimly lit by a single bulb hanging from the ceiling. It wasn't a regular medical room. It was cold, sterile, and disturbingly quiet. In the center stood a metal examination bed with restraints attached to its sides. A camera on a tripod faced the bed, and scattered around were medical tools, ropes, and stained sheets. On a table lay several photographs of women she didn't recognize, each with a patient number written beneath. Some looked terrified, others unconscious. Ria's knees weakened. She backed away, her breath shaking. The realization hit her. This wasn't a clinic helping women. It was a place of exploitation and abuse. Every late-night visitor, every missing record suddenly made sense. She turned off the light, closed the door quietly, and hurried home. That night she couldn't sleep, her mind filled with images of what she had seen. She decided she would quit in the morning and tell someone what was happening. But morning never came the way she expected. When the staff arrived, Dr. Solkar announced calmly that Ria had resigned and returned to her village. He smiled as if nothing was wrong, his tone relaxed and convincing. The others didn't question it, but when Mira Solkar visited the clinic later that week, she found Ria's purse lying forgotten in the storeroom, covered in dust. It was the same purse she carried every day to work, her ID card still inside. For the first time, Mira felt a chill run down her spine. She didn't know where Ria had gone, and her husband had no answers. But deep in her heart, something told her the truth was far darker than she could imagine. The clinic she had once been proud of was beginning to feel like a place she no longer recognized. And somewhere, in that hidden basement room, the secrets of Solkar Women's Care waited to be uncovered. Mira Solkar had always trusted her husband completely. For years she believed his long hours and late-night emergencies were simply the sacrifices of a dedicated doctor. But after Ria's sudden disappearance, that trust began to crumble. Mira couldn't ignore the uneasiness in her chest anymore. The cheerful atmosphere in the clinic had changed, replaced by silence and nervous glances among the staff. Even the regular patients seemed fewer now, and some who came once never returned again. Mira felt something was being hidden, something terrible, and her instincts told her it was time to look deeper. Her first discovery happened by accident. One morning, as she was tidying Arvind's study, she noticed his briefcase half open on the floor. Inside were several folders, but what caught her attention was a small black envelope tucked between medical reports. She opened it and found multiple ID cards, each showing different women with fake names and mismatched birth dates. Some of the women looked familiar. Mira remembered seeing their faces in news articles about missing persons. Her hands began to shake as she placed the photos back. She couldn't understand why her husband would have these. Fear settled in her stomach like a stone. But a stronger feeling began to rise, too. Suspicion. That evening, Mira decided to visit the clinic on her own. She waited until Arvind left for a supposed emergency operation and then used her spare keys. The clinic looked different in the dark. The quiet halls heavy with an unnatural stillness. Her footsteps echoed softly as she moved through the reception area and down the corridor. Everything appeared normal at first. The patient rooms were neatly arranged, the shelves organized. But something felt wrong. The air smelled faintly of chemicals and something metallic. She went into the storage area where Ria's belongings had been found earlier. Her eyes scanned the walls and then stopped at the medicine cabinet. It seemed oddly placed, slightly tilted away from the wall. When she pushed it aside, she froze. Behind it was a small, narrow door with a metal handle. Her heart raced. She hesitated for a moment, then slowly turned the knob and stepped inside. The room beyond was dim and cold. It looked nothing like the rest of the clinic. In the center stood a metal bed with straps attached to its sides. Cameras were mounted on the walls, their lenses pointing directly at the bed. On one corner table were used syringes, gloves, and several opened bottles labeled with strong sedatives. The floor had dark stains that refused to wash away. Mira covered her mouth as she realized what she was seeing. This wasn't a place for treatment. It was a place for control, for cruelty, for something monstrous. On another table, she found a file marked with a strange code. Inside were photographs of young women, along with details of their supposed treatments. Each file ended abruptly with a date. No discharge information, no contact details. She flipped through more papers and noticed a foreign phone number written repeatedly across several pages. It was clear now that her husband's clinic was not a legitimate medical center. It was being used as a cover for trafficking, and the women listed in those files had likely never left alive. Mira stumbled backward, her breath coming in gasps. The man she had shared her life with, the one she had defended and loved, was running a secret business of unimaginable evil. She wanted to run, to scream, but fear held her still. She knew if Arvind found out what she had seen, her life would be in danger too. She took photos of the room with her phone and quickly locked the door behind her. That night, she couldn't eat or sleep. Her mind replayed every moment. The missing nurse, the fake IDs, the hidden chamber. Everything made sense now. Mira decided she couldn't stay silent anymore. She needed help. And she knew just the person who had been suspicious all along, Kiran Joshi, the social worker investigating the missing women. The next morning, while Arvind was at the hospital, Mira contacted Kiran in secret. They met briefly at a cafe far from the clinic, and Mira showed her the evidence. Kiran listened carefully, realizing that the case she had been chasing for months finally had a name. They agreed to go to the police together, but they didn't know that Dr. Arvind had already begun to suspect that his wife was hiding something. He had noticed her nervousness, the way she avoided his eyes, and he was watching her closely. Mira thought she was one step ahead, but in truth, the walls were already closing in. The man she once loved was now her greatest threat, and what she had uncovered was far darker than she could have imagined. The night Mira decided to expose her husband was the last peaceful night she ever lived. For days she had been carrying the weight of her discovery, hiding her fear behind a quiet face. She knew she couldn't delay any longer. Every time she looked at Arvind, she saw not a husband, but a stranger, a man capable of unimaginable cruelty. Kiran Joshi had promised to meet her again in 2 days to finalize the report for the police, but Mira never got that far. The darkness inside Solkar Women's Care was about to swallow her whole. That evening, Arvind returned home earlier than usual. He seemed calm, but there was a sharpness in his eyes Mira had never seen before. He told her the clinic had been inspected by local authorities after someone had filed an anonymous tip. The words made Mira's heart drop. She realized he already knew. The police hadn't come, but someone had warned him. Arvind's contacts ran deep. He had friends in the medical board, the police, even local politicians. He had built his empire on fear and silence, and he wouldn't let anyone, not even his wife, destroy it. The next morning, Mira was gone. Arvind told the neighbors that she had gone to visit her sister in Mumbai. He smiled politely, showing no sign of worry. He even went to work as usual, greeting patients and pretending everything was normal. But beneath his calm expression, he was unraveling. He had already taken care of what he called a necessary problem. 2 days later, a sanitation worker discovered a large black suitcase floating near the banks of the Mula River. Inside was the lifeless body of a woman wrapped in a clinic bedsheet. Her hands were bruised, her hair matted with dirt, and her neck bore deep marks of strangulation. When police identified her as Mira Solkar, the entire city went silent. News spread like wildfire. The respected doctor's wife had been murdered, and suspicion immediately turned toward him. Inspector Dev Patkar, a quiet but relentless investigator, was assigned to the case. He had followed the missing women reports for months and had always suspected a bigger operation behind them. Mira's death connected everything. When police searched the Solkar home, they found her phone hidden behind a curtain. Inside it were photographs, the secret room, the files, the fake IDs. Mira had gathered enough evidence to bring down her husband, but she never got the chance. The investigation moved quickly. The police sealed the clinic and began a full search. What they found shocked everyone. Beneath the clean, professional facade of Solkar Women's Care was a maze of hidden rooms, forged documents, and unregistered medical equipment. Computers contained encrypted files listing dozens of names, women from rural areas, some minors, all marked as processed. In a locked cabinet, they found passports, foreign currency, and correspondence with a trafficking ring operating in Dubai and Bangkok. When questioned, Arvind maintained his innocence. He claimed he was being framed by jealous competitors, but forensic evidence painted a different picture. Mira's DNA was found under his fingernails, and fibers from the clinic's bedsheet matched the one wrapped around her body. Still, Arvind refused to confess. His eyes remained cold, his voice steady. He insisted he loved his wife and that she had been depressed. Inspector Dev wasn't convinced. He worked with Kiran Joshi, who provided her previous reports linking the clinic to the missing women. Together, they built a case strong enough to destroy Arvind's carefully crafted image. For the first time, the public saw through the mask. News channels ran endless stories about the monster doctor, and protests erupted outside the clinic gates. As police dug deeper, they found something even more chilling. Ria Vancour's remains were discovered buried behind the clinic's compound near the waste disposal pit. Her bones showed signs of restraint and injury. The truth was undeniable now. The respected doctor had been using his clinic to trap and exploit vulnerable women, recording them, selling their identities, and silencing anyone who threatened to expose him. Mira's murder became the final piece that brought everything crashing down. It was her courage and the evidence she left behind that ensured her husband would never walk free again. The same walls that once hid his crimes now stood as evidence of his downfall. When the police finally arrested Dr. Arvind Solkar, he didn't resist. He simply stared blankly, as if the man inside him had already died. But for the city of Pune, the scars he left behind would never fade. The story of the doctor and his wife became a haunting reminder that evil often hides behind respectability. And sometimes, the people closest to us are the ones we should fear the most. Dr. Arvind Solkar's arrest sent shockwaves through the entire city. The news spread faster than anyone could control. The man who had once been celebrated for bringing new life into the world was now being called a murderer and trafficker. Crowds gathered outside the police station demanding justice for Mira and all the women who had vanished through the doors of his clinic. For the first time in his life, Arvind faced a world that saw him for what he truly was. His fame, his charm, his carefully constructed reputation, all of it shattered in a matter of days. Inside the interrogation room, Arvind sat silently, staring at the wall. Investigators questioned him for hours, but he barely spoke. He denied everything, then changed his story, then fell silent again. Inspector Dev Patkar had seen many criminals, but none so cold and detached. Even when presented with photographs of the victims, Arvind showed no emotion. It was as if he had separated himself completely from the reality of what he had done. The only time his expression changed was when Mira's photo was placed before him. For a brief moment, his eyes flickered. Not with guilt, but with anger. The evidence was overwhelming. Investigators uncovered financial records proving large cash transfers to accounts linked with international trafficking rings. Dozens of forged medical documents were found in his handwriting, and the hidden cameras from the secret room contained hours of disturbing footage that matched the missing person's timelines. His clinic had been a hub for organized exploitation disguised as medical care. The women who trusted him were sedated, recorded, and sold into networks that spanned across borders. It was a level of depravity no one could have imagined. The trial that followed drew national attention. Media outlets covered every hearing, every detail, every piece of evidence that emerged. Witnesses came forward, including former staff members who had been too afraid to speak before. They described the fear they lived under, the nights they were told to leave early, and the strange deliveries that arrived in unmarked vans. Each testimony painted a clearer picture of the man behind the mask. The prosecution presented Mira's photos, her recorded notes, and the messages she had exchanged with Kiran Joshi. Her courage became the foundation of the entire case. Arvind's defense tried to argue mental instability, claiming the doctor had suffered from severe psychological breakdowns due to work stress. But the evidence of methodical planning and coordination destroyed that argument. Every action he took had been deliberate, precise, and motivated by greed. The court heard stories of how he targeted vulnerable women, patients from poor families, migrants, and domestic workers, offering them medical help and then turning them into victims. Kiran Joshi attended every session of the trial. She sat quietly in the courtroom, clutching the file that contained Mira's original notes. When the verdict was finally read, the room fell silent. Dr. Arvind Solkar was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The judge called his crimes a betrayal of trust so deep that no punishment could truly repay the suffering he caused. Outside the courthouse, people gathered to celebrate justice for Mira and the countless unnamed women who had suffered. News outlets broadcast images of the clinic being demolished days later, its walls torn down and replaced with a new women's recovery center funded by the government. A small memorial plaque was installed near the entrance bearing Mira Solkar's name, a tribute to her bravery and the price she paid to uncover the truth. Inside prison, Arvind became a ghost of himself. The man who once controlled others' lives now lived in silence and isolation. Other inmates avoided him, and even the guards treated him with disgust. He spent his days pacing in his cell, whispering to himself, replaying the life he had lost. He never showed remorse, not once, but he could not escape the weight of what he had done. For Kiran, the case left permanent scars. She continued her work helping victims of trafficking, often visiting the New Women's Center. Every time she saw Mira's name engraved on the plaque, she felt both sorrow and pride. Mira had been just one woman against a powerful man, but her courage had broken an entire network of crime. In the end, the story of Dr. Arvind Solkar became a grim lesson, a reminder that evil doesn't always wear a monster's face. Sometimes it hides behind a doctor's smile, a professional's voice, or a husband's gentle tone. The city of Pune moved on, but the memory of Solkar Women's Care remained a ghost story whispered among locals. It stood as a warning that trust, once broken, can reveal horrors far greater than anyone dares to imagine.